Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is now 7:30, and I will call this special budget work session of the Burnsville City Council to order. And for our listening audience, tonight's meeting is being conducted both in person and online. Members of the public may attend in person if they would like, or the public can also watch the meeting on Burnsville, mn.gov/meetings, or they can watch the meeting on Comcast Channel 16 or 859. The public can also participate through Zoom by joining us at zoom.us/join. More information is available on our website and on the meeting's webpage and in the council agenda packet. So tonight, the item that is before us for our budget discussion is the property tax levy. And I'll go first to our city manager to make some opening remarks. And then I believe our deputy city manager and CFO, Jenny Rhodey, is doing the presentation. City Manager Lindberg.
Absolutely. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Good to be with you this evening. Tonight is our 2025 proposed operating budget and tax levy presentation. This presentation comes as part of your budget calendar, our budget calendar, ahead of your max tax decision, your preliminary levy decision, which is scheduled for the City Council meeting on Tuesday, September 17th. That preliminary levy is the maximum amount the City Council can set for a property tax levy before approving a final levy in December. Just as a reminder to the community, that preliminary levy is shown as a proposed tax amount on tax statements that are mailed in November to the community. Tonight is a representation. While many cities are just starting these conversations, we have been working on our budget and talking about this particular operating budget and the levy since January. So Jenny will actually reference that in some of our market analysis and comparative summaries, as most cities are just starting this work and don't have the level of information that we'll be talking about in terms of our operating budget and the property tax levy this evening. I would be remiss not to recognize the incredible amount of work that directors around this table and many on our team have put in to not only proposing to you tonight a operating budget and property tax levy at balanced to the 7.06% year-over-year property tax levy that was included in the resolution that the council considered and adopted in 2022 as we implemented our new FMP. There's been a lot of work to find a path to balancing the budget, and we did that as a team, certainly with the council's feedback and our interactions and your input along the way. I'm just really proud of the process this year in particular. The people who are sitting around this table have invested a lot, and we talk as an organization about service takes sacrifice. They've all sacrificed of their own to make this happen. Their time, their energy, their talents, and that's very much appreciated from my perspective. Again, we're going to present to you a balanced budget this evening to that 7.0% year-over-year property tax levy that we first talked about for 2025, all the way back, believe it or not, in 2022. Balancing the budget this year did require us to identify, as a team, $1.6 million in effectiveness corrections, both on the revenue and the expenditure side of the budget. That's in part due to the reality that we had planned for in that original FMP. And as we've revised along the way, Council is well aware of the policy direction that we've taken the budget, where Jenny will talk about our fund balance position, essentially using those ARPA funds to relieve pressure on our property taxpayers. And now we'll start talking about the planned realities around our fund balance position and what that means in both the near years and the out years as we continue to work on refining our financial position. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jenny, who has a presentation for you. As always, feel free, if there's questions as we go along, feel free to ask those. We'll be keeping track of those and obviously reporting back to you and including those in the public record as we move on. One thing that I did forget to mention is the community has access to all of the conversations that we've had here in work sessions or city council meetings on our budget landing page, along with every presentation, every document related to the budget, along with resources to kind of explore the more intimate details of the budget should someone choose. That is all at burnsvillemn.gov/budget. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jenny. This time I mean it.
Thanks, Greg. Good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. Tonight we'll run through a discussion on the 2025 proposed operating budget and tax levy. I'll start out tonight talking about the budget calendar. So these are the remaining scheduled meetings where we've got planned budget discussions. Next Tuesday, August 27th, we'll hear the remaining department budget presentations from police and fire. On September 10th, that discussion will be for the proposed 2025 fees and utility rate studies, and we'll also take a look at those funds that rely on the fees, mainly the enterprise funds and utility funds. We'll take a look at those financial plans for those related funds. On September 17th, as Greg mentioned, we've scheduled the adoption of the proposed city and EDA property tax levy. That is at a regular meeting, and that will be the proposed levy, or max tax as a lot of people refer to it. On November 26th, we've got a scheduled discussion on the proposed 2025 budget if we need it. So that is planned for at this time. And December 5th, at that regular meeting, we've scheduled the adoption of the city and EDA property tax levy and budget, along with the adoption of the capital improvement plan as well. Some overview of the 2025 budget. As Greg mentioned, we've balanced to the 7.06% tax levy increase that we talked about in the resolution, the non-binding tax levy resolution way back in 2022. With that, the impact to the median value home in property taxes and city property taxes is just under $8 per month. Overall, city taxable market value increased by about 0.4%, or about $35 million. So a much smaller increase than we've been used to the last 4 or 5 years, where we've regularly seen 5 to 6%, and even in 2023 we saw about a 16% increase. With that, the tax rate did increase from 42.5% to 45.2%. And as Greg mentioned, to balance this budget to the 7.06% increase, we did need to make budget effectiveness corrections of about $1.6 million annually over that 5-year projection window. So those changes were made. One thing we always do at this time of the year, we also take a look and compare with a lot of our market cities, a lot of our comparable cities, where they're at in their property tax discussions. We do tend to be on the early side, so these will change, right, as cities get more into their budget discussions. These preliminary numbers will change, but these are the amounts that other cities have shared with us in terms of what they're proposing, what they think their preliminary tax levies will be. So we're really kind of bottom half in terms of where we land in terms of the percentage at 7.06%, with an average, if you average all these, it's about 8.3%. What we're hearing, some cities have increased, a lot of cities are increasing their public safety investments. We're hearing additional parks investments. So some of the same things that we're talking about as we look at, where our budget pressures are, where our investments are going. They're having a lot of other cities are having those same discussions. We had, as far as the pressures for this year, and I kind of want to build on what Greg said about this being a team effort. Building this budget was a team team sport. We met early when departments had completed their budget requests and talked with the city manager about each department's request. We also met as a leadership team over the last month and really talked about this operating budget and brainstormed, ways that we were going to make these adjustment and effectiveness corrections. So it really everybody on the team really worked hard on this. Some of the impacts that we're seeing, still unprecedented inflationary impacts, we're still seeing those. While inflation has moderated, we're still feeling that pressure, and especially in some of our capital funds. As we look at equipment and vehicle, that fund has really been stressed by those additional inflationary factors. Workers' compensation continues to be a pressure. We've assumed about a 7.5% increase next year on premiums. The impact of PTSD and duty disability, those continue to have long-lasting impacts and impact the budget overall. Health insurance pressures continue at 14% for 2025ve. So those have all been
Health insurance.
included in this year's budget.
What was first, like 18s?
Additionally, we've made additional investments in well-being for staff, really to take care of staff, take care of the people that take care of the community. Increasing our investment in embedded mental health services for police and fire, piloting a program on the non-public safety side for those employees. Well-being time, an enhanced EAP program, a number of investments. So those are also included in the budget.
Jenny, I think perhaps an important place just to expand. We had talked about one investment and one significant pressure over the course of the past couple of months that really have had an impact on this year's budget position. The first being what we anticipated to be a 22% increase in health insurance premiums. So that was a big gulp when we first got it.
Yeah.
It's because of the good work of our HR team going out with an RFP that number was brought down to, and that was with the 22% was within a 1-year agreement with our current provider.
With health.
Our
because
current provider has provided a bid back at 14% for a 2-year agreement. So we had our team in HR and finance fairly quickly turn around a different reality for us. So a much better position than we expected.
That's what
to
I
be in.
just said to Greg. I said, "Oh my God, it came down to 14. So what happened?" And
Now, we had
it's-
anticipated about a 9% increase in our FMP assumptions, so we still had to absorb additional pressures, which is why it's an important component of this discussion. The second piece was when you affirmed our well-being investments just a few weeks ago in a city council meeting, we had indicated that we believed that we would need about $250,000, about $250,000 to cover the additional cost, essentially in and amongst those investments, in additional resources for police and fire embedded mental health. Again, as we talk about this balanced budget to the projected 7.06% year-over-year property tax levy increase, we are not suggesting that the community need to invest more in additional revenues. So we've been able to again identify effectiveness corrections across the organization to take those costs and more effectively use current resources. So that's also very good news and credit to the team as we've pulled the more detailed assumptions into the budget process.
Okay, because I have a question when you get to the point where you start talking about the fund balance, but proceed.
Okay, thank you. Deferred capital and maintenance investments have also had an impact, as we're seeing those as additional pressures on the especially the equipment and vehicle fund, and having to program in equipment certificates as part of our financing structure for that fund. That is an additional pressure on the levy. And as we planned in 2023, and we're working through that plan, or this is our 3rd year on that plan, we've planned to spend down fund balance, but that also means we we have less flexibility for some of those one-time or unexpected things, and that adds pressure and is part of that 1.6 million that we're balancing too. So those all are working together.
Yeah. So before you move on, and I've said this before, my concern with spending down the fund balance, when you look at those two cities, Eden Prairie and Plymouth, and they're starting their work on their budget. So there are two pieces that I think I understand from those two cities, is that, one, they don't have a full-time fire like we do.
I think I'm not sure about their current staffing level. I know they're moving to some
Yeah,
full-time
but
fire, so they're
like right
they're
now,
kind of
they
in
don't
transition.
have. And the second is they have healthy fund balance. And so that from a long lens view, I'd like to know more about how we're managing, how we're spending down that fund balance, and we don't have flexibility as we continue to move forward. And God forbid we have some kind of natural disaster, and we have experienced natural disasters as well as other kinds of incidents that impact us. I'd like to know more whether we have flexibility or not with regard to the pressures, because we continue to draw down on that fund balance.
Certainly is why, we do the work we do to really prepare a responsible budget moving forward. Part of what we'll kind of talk about later in the presentation is we do get down to our minimum in 27 and 28, and that was really always part of that long-term 5-year plan, right? So in 2024, 2023, in 2022, when we did, made this plan to fund the additional organizational analysis investments and fund that over the long term. Part of that was we knew we would build up some fund balance in those early years, but we knew we'd have years where we spent it down to that minimum. Certainly part of those later years, and you'll start to see this in 2029, we've planned in those levy projections to start building up that reserve again. So that is part of the long term, when you look at 5 to 10 years, that needs to be part of the plan, and we will always make sure that when we're looking at that projection window, that we are above our fund balance requirements. We're not going to go below it. If I look out at the 10-year plan right now, we've built a 10-year plan, and granted, things change, right? From year to year, you can guarantee what we think today isn't going to be what happens even next year, but we're always thinking about the future, so that if you took a look at my 10-year spreadsheet, we would be building up fund balance. That's always built into that calculation. So while we don't know the future, we are, putting together a plan that long-term is financially feasible and keeps us above 40%, but really above 45% is where we strive to be if as you look at our policy. So that's really where we will get in. I think if you went out to 2030, 2031 right now, we're going to be in that 45%. So we're building that back up, and this was part of the strategy for 2023's budget for that 5-year plan.
Okay.
I think, Mayor, to your question, and I think for clarity for the community, we had planned in 2027 and 2028 through the original FMP, when we talked about the strategic implementation of the 2023 budget, essentially, in the new FMP, we had planned in 27 and 28 to be at or near our fund balance minimums as we built up fund balance to then invest in police and fire and other city staff to do what we had intended to do in the policy decision the council met at the time. So when we talk about the next couple of years about being cautious around fund balance and not having the flexibility that we've had in the past, that's been a plan all along. I think it's important to note that we believe, from a staff perspective, that the council's policy position and the budget that we're putting in front of you is not only financially responsible, but it keeps the city in a strong position. It is important for us at the same time to talk about being at fund balance minimums for those 2 years, 27 and 28, absolutely does put us in a careful position of making sure that we're tending our plan, not only in the 5-year window of time, but also, to Jenny's point, 10 years out. And you'll see some of that as we start talking about some of those out years and fund balance position that we do every year, right? 1 year passes and we add another year, and the budget is just that. It's a snapshot in time as we present it, but we do have really thoughtful and intentional plans here to make sure that we're meeting the needs of the community, that we're delivering excellent service to the level and the expectation of the city council and the community, and that we're putting ourselves and keeping ourselves in a financially sound position to deal with both expected and unexpected realities that come along. But we believe that it's important for us to be talking about, particularly in 27 and 28, we have less flexibility than we've had in years past or in the current budget year, as an example. And that was part of the plan.
Okay.
And we'll need to continue to work the plan to make sure that we continue to position ourselves in a healthy place.
And we
So
have
we're,
oh, sorry.
there is a strategy to build up, because when
We will
I
need to
see
do that.
we plan to spend down, and then I'm thinking, okay.
Yep.
But what you're telling me is that in your spreadsheet, you also have factored in a plan to continue to make sure that we continue to fund the fund balance, so we get to where we need to be. And not be at the minimum.
So part of how we analyze the general fund, we always are looking at the fund balance as, kind of that last result. And if the fund balance doesn't work, right, like we know we have to go back and figure it out, right? So that's kind of the most simple way of saying it, right? We've dealt with a lot of unexpected conditions over the past 2 years, things that we maybe didn't foresee in 2022, and we've still been able to keep true to that plan. And so while it has been challenging and we have had to make some sacrifices and changes, certainly we've been able to maintain that plan and really work that plan that we established 2 years ago. 2 years ago, sorry.
Okay.
Math.
Okay. All right. Good to know.
Realities, the current 5-year plan really maintains current services and service levels. Again, we are planning to spend down fund balance to policy minimums. And if you were to compare that snapshot of the general fund last year and the year before, it would look much the same. Certainly, the totals have gotten larger than we expected with inflationary pressures and other things. The totals aren't the same, but if you look at that trajectory and where that fund balance is, it would look very similar. So, and as a result, like Greg's kind of building off what Greg said, we don't really have a lot of flexibility in those 2 years to use fund balance to deal with unexpected changes, and we'll have to be flexible in how we move forward. Studies. As we've talked about over the past year and a half, we have a number of studies that really inform our future budget, certainly capital improvement studies. We reviewed in July the CIP plan and those 6 studies that are ongoing. Certainly those have impacts to the capital plan as well as to the operating budgets. Currently the parks plan and the water treatment condition assessment, those are both being factored into the capital plans, and we're doing additional studies in parks to inform parks visioning as well as operations and maintenance. The organizational analysis, we'll take a look at that again and update that at the end of the year, looking at service inventory, staffing, and compensation, those 3 parts of that org analysis. A couple of other future or ongoing studies. We currently have a communications assessment that's started a couple of months ago, and that's going to wrap up here this fall. That'll certainly inform future budgets. A fire department standards of cover, that's upcoming, so that will have operational impacts once that's complete. And we have an informational technology assessment that was just approved, and that will be starting here this fall. So those 3 studies are either in the works or will be starting in the very near future. The police staffing assessment, we talked about that in early February. That is already included in the budget, so that has been included in the 2025 operating budget. As we look out over the next 5 years, what we're looking at in terms of property tax increases, we wanted to show this 5-year window. The non-binding tax levy resolutions are scheduled to be done in 2027. Those are 7.06, 7.4%, and 7.69. Our intent is to balance to those levies each year. As we look out in 2028 and 2029, right now what we're showing is we would need about a 7% increase in each of those years to keep our funds whole, the general fund balance above 40%, and start building back up in 2029. Certainly, a couple of different, we certainly have inflationary pressures, keeping our staff whole, the health insurance, workers' comp, those are all pressures that are built into here. Additional staffing from the police staffing assessment, that's about a 0.8% increase in those last couple of years of this plan, as well as we had to add equipment certificates into the equipment and vehicle fund. So certainly debt levies for those funds are included in the 2026 through 2029 levy assumptions. And by 2029, it's a little over 1% of the levy. So that's kind of, you see us at about 7%. Those items are starting to impact what we need in those final 2 years. So certainly we're seeing some pressures from that additional debt. In terms of the effectiveness corrections that we've included in this year's budget, we have, generally kind of 5 areas where we have looked at making some changes to balance the budget. As we started, we looked at revenues, and we really increased some revenue assumptions in different areas and in certain targeted areas where we felt like it made sense. So while we're not being overly aggressive, we're not being overly conservative in those areas either. Some charges for service areas, EMS, some state aid revenues that we've right-sized, and some things like that. As we looked, the next item, we looked at host landfill fees. So host landfill fees are shared between equipment and vehicle facilities and the Parks Fund. And facilities gets the smallest portion at about 25%, and then it's divided evenly between parks and equipment and vehicle. And what we're proposing is for those next 3 years in the plan to really reallocate those host landfill fees to equipment and vehicle fund to help fund that debt service in that first 3 years of those equipment certificates, to kind of help feather that in until we get to 2028, and then we would assign those landfill host fees back to the facilities fund. So that is a proposal as part of the operating budget. It is a little over about $440,000 annually.
So one reminder back to our capital budget presentation, certainly for your information and for the viewing community, the allocation of host landfill fees to vehicle and equipment, largely that 3-year decision to cover debt service, addresses the cost of a $2+ million mobile command unit that is planned and represented in the 2025 Vehicle and Equipment Capital Improvement Fund. Unfortunately, there was a valiant effort made by our team to connect with our not only our local but our national federal delegation to pursue some federal funding for that project. Unfortunately, it was removed last week from the final bill to go past the Senate's I believe it was, now I'm
Yeah.
totally forgetting Tanya, but Homeland Security Committee, or their Homeland Security bill. So unfortunately, we were not successful in our endeavor to cover about $1.4 million through some federal funding with that project. But we do believe that operationally it is a necessity. It is a costly capital investment, but one that is absolutely needed to ensure our police and fire operations can continue to meet the service demands needs of the community, and the operational needs of our police and fire department. So a little bit of bad news there, but important for us to find a alternative path to keep that project funded from our perspective. And to Jenny's point, one of the major assumptions that we're presenting to you tonight for your feedback.
Yep. The next item, we really took a look at current expenditures across departments, and we reduced those, I think, an annual average of about $270,000. So took a look at every department, took a look at what they had, really took a deeper dive on five-year history on spending and what their plans were, and we were able to come up with $270,000 across departments. To save some money in the budget for 2025. The last two items, we implemented a vacancy factor. So certainly we know we have a number of staff vacancies throughout the year. People leave, takes a little while to fill their position, or people retire. So there is just some level of vacancy. Additionally, with the org analysis, all those positions don't come online on January 1st. Typically, we have budgeted for a full year in that first year of all those positions, but we know that over the past 2 years, that just realistically doesn't all happen. So we did implement an assumption for a vacancy factor. We took a look at our 5-year budget to actuals and really took an average and calculated what that would be for each year for those applicable items. So that was one of the factors that one of the items that we are proposing in the budget tonight. And finally, the last item, as we get closer with the EDA levy, as we get closer to the year where we are going to be levying the maximum, we took a deeper look at that calculation. It did decrease just slightly from what we thought it was going to be in 2023. Certainly market values, the maximum levy is based on the prior year's estimated market value, about 0.1813%. And so that came down. So actually what we were planning originally in 2023 was just over our maximum. We are responsible for making sure we're within that maximum. So we did adjust those maximum levies in those projected out years down a little bit to about within 50,000 of that maximum. And certainly we'll be looking at that each year as we get to that point and recalculating, and we can readjust in those out years. But it did have a slight reduction in the EDA levy over 26 through 2029, so that did alleviate some of the pressure on that total tax levy. With that, wanted to make sure we compared where we are with our EDA investment fund. I took a look at what we proposed in 2023 when we did implement that levy increase over that 5 years, and where we are with current budget projections. Certainly, as you can see throughout the 5 years, but highlighting that 2027 year, we thought we'd have about $5.3 million by 2027. Right now, we are projecting to have about $6.8 million. Now, I just told you those levies decreased slightly, so that probably doesn't make a lot of sense. But with that, we have also decreased expenditures in that fund. There were some things that were eliminated from the budget, certain items, brand projects, some other things that we've taken out of that EDA budget to really help build up that fund, build up that investment fund. So certainly, even with that slight adjustment, we're still looking about $1.5 million higher than we thought we would be in 2027. And currently, if you look at 2023, which is an audited number, we're a little under $1.4 million higher than what we projected to be. So certainly, that fund balance is healthy. We're building that as we planned. So just wanted to take a snapshot at that. We'll certainly look at the EDA finance plan graph too later on, and you'll be able to see that there as well. So with that, we did something a little different. So I've kind of talked about each of these corrections. This is the impact that each of those adjustments had in the 5-year budget. So as you look at these items, certainly they've had a pretty, you can see the impact of each item. On average, if you took the average of these, it's an average annual impact of just under $1.6 million.
One comment, just for
Yeah.
your education and for the community, I think it's important to note that each of these corrections were identified and vetted through an extensive series of conversations between the leadership team. One of the points that I think is probably most salient is on the vacancy factor. You can see there's some significant planned effectiveness or cost expenditure savings in 25 and 26. The reality is those are the heavy planned years of the implementation of the organizational analysis. And to Jenny's earlier point, the original organizational analysis, the original FMP, assumed that on January 1st we would have hired and full staff across the organization. That is admittedly the most conservative way to look at any planning for FTEs. However, we don't believe that it is realistic. And we've talked extensively as a team about not impacting the policy direction the City Council has given us or our commitments to our operations. So there is no assumption in that vacancy factor that if we find the right police officers that we won't hire them.
Yes.
There is an assumption that just because of the natural, and not to make an example out of the police department, but it's a good one, that at the end of the day, we know by past experience that we always have a vacancy factor in the police department. Right now, generally speaking, that vacancy factor rolls up into a positive audited financial position when we close the books annually. Said another way, we didn't make that expenditure. There's additional savings or there's additional money that then is put into fund balance. These assumptions are still very conservative. Teams here and certainly can comment. We believe, as a matter of fact, this idea was originally suggested by our police department. We believe that it continues to meet operational needs and at the same time ensures that we're not putting unnecessary pressure on our taxpayer, on the property tax levy, as we continue to plan in the future. I just wanted to make, and again, I will stop droning on. I just wanted to make sure that we underscore that there's no operational impact. We're still fully implementing the organizational analysis as the council has authorized it, but we do believe this is a more effective way to look at our financial position, particularly in the years where we know that we're going to be doing some pretty significant recruitment across the organization, primarily in the police and fire department.
Okay.
Yeah, certainly, yes. Hiring decisions are not going to be made based on, we've counted on this vacancy factor. We're going to hire the right people for those right positions. And we also want to recognize, what I think what we've found in the last couple of years as we've implemented the org analysis. You can see 27 through 29 are lighter because the bulk of the org analysis positions really are scheduled for 25 and 26.
So when we look at our vacancy factor, so I know that the high demand is always in fire and police, but we also have demand in other departments like in public works, in IT, and we're doing a communications analysis now, and so we'll take a look at all of that. And so when we get to the point where, because I'm always looking also during the council weekly on what's coming out of HR. So I see that we have hired some new people, but at the same time, there seems to be still vacancy in other departments that we need to also fill.
Absolutely,
And know that in Jeff's department, he also is looking for, aren't you looking for a deputy community development person? And so,
we believe that this is the most effective way to represent financially the current commitments and investments the city council has made, and we don't believe it presents us with operational challenges.
okay, as long as you tell me, because that's your
Across the-
domain.
Yep, across the organization.
I just want to make sure the other departments are also being well addressed and cared for.
And absolutely, everyone in this organization and departments across the organization are equally important to me in that regard. The reality is that 60+% of our current expenditures
Yeah.
are police and fire.
Yes.
So when we look at making a real difference in bringing down property tax levy pressures, fact of the matter is, it's the most effective way
Yeah.
for us to correct
Yeah.
for that,
Yeah.
and still make sure that we're meeting the operational needs. And I don't want to put words in Tanya's mouth. She can certainly represent the perspective herself, but it's just a larger percentage of
Yeah.
the total operating budget.
All right, well, we'll move into some of the finance plans. We'll run through a couple of some of the special revenue funds, and then we'll talk in more detail about the general fund and fund balance. First is the cable franchise fee fund. As you probably remember, a couple of years ago, we kind of changed the structure of that fund. We brought communications into the general fund, and with PEG fees and franchise fees steadily declining in that fund, it really couldn't support those operations anymore. Right now, the cable franchise fee does provide some funding to the general fund on a declining basis. So every year that transfer is declining to really account for those declining franchise fee and PEG fees. Now, the decline has probably come at a faster rate than we originally anticipated, so certainly we, on an annual basis, will review those assumptions, and if we need to adjust support to the general fund, or as you can see in 2029, we're down to about $50,000 of fund balance. Certainly in 2030 and 2031, the plan is that the general fund will need to start transferring money to this fund to support those operations, and that really is capital investment, and it accounts for the cable TV and multimedia functions within the city. So certainly part of the longer 10-year plan, while we show 5 years, we usually look 10 years out in this plan. Part of the 10-year plan is to really will really provide support from the general fund to this fund on an increasing basis, really to make up for that downward movement on those franchise fees. The EDA investment funds, as you can see, were by 2029. So certainly the last table we saw was 2027, really comparing that 2023 prediction to the 2025 projection here. When we look out to 2029, we're going to have just under $10 million in that fund. So we really are building up an investment fund there. You can see the blue line is funding sources. That's certainly the majority of that is the tax levy. And then that gray bar there is annual expenses of, I think, just under $400,000, about $370,000 annually. The forestry fund. This fund originally started as a way to deal with emerald ash borer that we knew was coming. We set aside an annual tax levy that increases about 3% a year to deal with emerald ash borer. As the situation evolved, we started to, instead of having to cut down so many trees in the early years, things really evolved, and we started treating a lot of the trees. So we didn't really experience the large expenses initially that we thought we would. In 2018, the purpose of this fund was really brought in to deal with other infestations that might come because we have so many trees. We really widen that purpose to dealing with diseased and infested trees, not just emerald ash borer. But as you can see, we have about $1 million right now in that fund available for treating our trees, cutting them down, replanting. So that really is the activity that's happening in this fund. And it's been about, it's been keeping pace. We've built a little fund balance over the last few years, so we haven't been spending it down. We don't have, plans that we're going to have to spend it down necessarily in the 5-year window.
Did we roll in the emerald ash borer into this fund?
The emerald ash borer is part of this fund. Yep.
Yeah,
So
because it was a separate fund, but we rolled it into this fund.
We
Because
actu-
one of the things is that I've gotten some really great, and I think you shared those emails from residents who were just very appreciative when we were taking down our diseased trees.
Yeah.
And it had an effect on some neighbors' trees, and we were able to help them as well along the way
Yep.
with that.
So I believe when we do that kind of activity, that would be accounted for
That
in
comes
this
up,
fund.
yeah.
I think we originally named this Emerald Ash Borer Fund, and we just broadened it to Forestry Fund so that we knew there would be other tree diseases coming and needs for it. So it really, Emerald Ash Borer is part of the
Yeah,
activities that
because
happen
I
in this
had an Egan resident ask me how we do that, because their city doesn't help them with the emerald ash borer. But I said that we did at the very beginning, when we saw that this disease was coming our way, we addressed it by beginning to put money away to treat emerald ash borer. And that's how we build up that fund and was able to do what we're doing with the trees that the city owns, but at the same time, when it infects also the trees, the residential trees that are adjacent to it, that we also help them out.
Yeah, so this is all funded through that levy, which I think this fund started in about 2011, 2012. It's been around for over a decade now, so we've,
Yeah.
and I think the levy started at 200,000, and we do increase it about 3% a year.
When we are treating our trees, do we use the same policy that we do with other things, that if our residents want to also get their trees treated, that they can also piggyback onto our contract to get their trees treated, but they're paying for it, but it's a reduced rate because it's going under our contract?
I'm not sure about that. Do you know, Mark?
We'd have to look into that one, Mayor, and get back to you.
Yeah, because you saw that email that came through from a resident that was really very, very appreciative of the work that our staff was doing with all of our trees, the boulevard trees that were infected. And then they had some trees that were infected, and we were able to help them out.
We'll look into that and get back to you, Mayor.
Okay, well, good work. I mean, it just, and then when people in other communities hear about it, they want to know. But I did say that we did put money away, and that's how we're getting at all of this.
Mm-hmm.
Well, good work to staff. People like it.
Next fund is the Sustainability Fund. This really accounts for the sustainability activities. A majority of this is funded through a grant from Dakota County. We do, I believe, receive, I can't remember the exact amount, but majority of the revenues coming in are from that grant, and then the expenditures that would be allowable under that grant. Additionally, there is a transfer in from the general fund for the city's individual. There's some sustainability programs that we have within the city that aren't part of that Dakota County grant. So certainly that's the other portion of this. So as it is grant funded, revenues generally are projected to equal expenditures. We do not have plans to build fund balance, but we do have about $400,000 in this fund right now. So the Youth Center Fund, this is really to fund.
It keeps going down because it gets funded by our CDBG, and CDBG keeps getting smaller.
Getting
and
a little smaller, yep. So really, this is really funding that BYC program, that music program over at the garage in collaboration with the school district, funded by a portion of our CDBG allocation. The general fund does put about $10,000 a year into this fund, really to keep up with maintenance over at that facility.
Just to clarify, none of
Yeah.
that goes for programming, it's just really to maintain the facility.
Yeah, to maintain
Yeah,
the spaces, right? We found originally we hadn't programmed that in, and you just do have costs associated with upkeep over there, so. yep.
yeah, I know, it just, but it's still, it just gets smaller and
Yeah,
smaller.
CBG does.
Yeah,
Yep. Next, we'll review some of the revenue assumptions, especially in the general fund. The property tax levy, as we mentioned, 7.06 is the assumption for 2025. In terms of fees and charges, those that aren't, governed by statute or aren't part of the utility rate study, generally speaking, we recommended, again, about a 3% inflator on those fees and charges. In terms of investment earnings, we do assume about 2%. We are relatively conservative in investment earnings, as we don't, right now, rates are pretty good. We do expect those to decline, but over the long-term plan, we do a program at about a 2% assumption. All other non-property tax revenues, we assume at about 1%. Miscellaneous types of things, reimbursements, those kinds of things are generally don't increase greatly year over year, so those are assumed at about 1%. What we're seeing on the expenditure side, in terms of the compensation plan, a change of about 5 to 6%. That includes a COLA, or cost of living increase assumption, of about 3%, and then that other 2.5% is really step increases, any other reclassification changes or things like that. Health insurance premiums, as we discussed on an earlier slide, are assumed to change at about 14%. We've programmed in a 7.5% increase in workers' compensation premiums. And then we're seeing about, or we're assuming about 3.5% over the plan life. We're seeing just a little higher than that this year, but it has come down quite a bit from last year. So as we look at general fund revenues, in total, we have about $59 million in revenues. Really, the largest portion of that, at 74%, is property tax levy. So as we look at revenues, I mean, we do, like I said, when we looked at those effectiveness changes, while we can move the needle with revenues, it really is those other revenues are about 25% of total revenues in the general fund, with charges for services being the largest at 12% and intergovernmental at 9% for this year. One thing to note, 2024 was the last year of ARPA funds, so in 2025, we don't have any ARPA funds programmed in, so our intergovernmental revenues are probably down about $2.5 to $3 million, but that's expected and was part of our plan. In terms of expenditures, as you can see, 76% of our expenditures, or our operational expenditures in the general fund, is really our people and our investment in staff. That's the largest component of the budget, with current expenditures about 22%. So when we look at where we're seeing pressures, but also where we need to make our investments, that really is in our people. Total expenditures for the general fund are just over $61 million for 2025.
Jenny, can you address both for the council and the community, what generally makes up the 2% of other expenditures?
Oh, yeah, sorry, I had that in my notes and I forgot. That is transfers out, so transfers to other funds. I think a good example would be, as we talked about in some of the special revenue funds, the general fund does provide support to the sustainability fund and also to that $10,000 to the youth center, so some of those kinds of things. And then the other portion of that 2% 2%, so it's about half and half, is just our payments of our lodging tax receipts to Experience Burnsville. General fund expenditures. So we'll just take a look at kind of the three major areas and look at what are the major changes that we're seeing in those areas. So for personnel, we have about a $3.3 million increase over 2024, about 7.7%, and that's made up of our investment in the organizational analysis positions for 2025 of about $1.2 million or 2.7%. In terms of our overall change in compensation, so those COLA increases, step increases, those kinds of things, that's about 3.2%. Health insurance premiums are about 1.2% of that overall change at about just a little over $500,000. Workers' comp insurance premiums are about $143,000 of that increase. And then our funding of compensated absences, so we fund those vested sick and vacation balances in a separate internal service fund. And so that investment, and we've had to increase that investment as vacation balances and sick leave balances have grown a little bit. We found the need, we needed to really increase our investment in that fund to keep that fund whole. So that was about a 0.3% increase.
Dan?
Is that 514,000 for health insurance, is that the 14%?
Yep, that's the year-over-year increase. Compared to health insurance, it's a 14% increase, but when you compare it to the total increase in personnel, that's why it's 1.2. But yeah,
That was one of my questions that got answered with the slide, is what does that 14% hike in rates equate to in dollars?
yep,
$500,000.
Yeah, it's huge.
And this
Yep.
number, Jenny, is an all-in number, right? We had planned for 9%, 14%, obviously a larger increase. This is an all-in number.
yep. So this is the entire increase, like what is it year over year? Yep,
I
Which
mean,
represents a 1.2% change.
yep.
but when I saw the slide, I was so happy to see 14 other than 22.
Yes,
It's
me
like,
too.
oh my God,
Me too.
it was a huge.
We all were happy to see it.
Would have been nice to go back
Surprising
down,
that
but
I'm
it was,
saying
I said, okay, take 14 over 22%.
Yep.
I think it's also a good, and Mike, feel free if you wish to speak to this. I think it's a good point of conversation that, well, we can celebrate that it wasn't 22%, 14% increases
It's
is
still-
not a sustainable
No.
No.
reality.
No.
Much like workers' compensation, we have
No.
real challenges in those areas. There
Yeah.
are things that that are not nice to do. There are things that we have to do. So we're talking as a team about being more creative than we have in the past, while continuing along and caring for and supporting our staff well. Health insurance in particular is an important investment. So we're looking at creative solutions to continue to do that, while managing costs as best as we can in
Yeah.
the future. And I'm confident that together with our employees, we'll come up with some ideas that help us be creative despite the market circumstances that we find
Yeah.
ourselves up against.
Yeah, because when I saw that workers' comp insurance increase also, that was,
Well,
But then
that's
I-
another challenging one.
I know,
right?
and that's another challenge, but I also understand what we've been going through. But the other thing is that it's a tough situation for us it's out of our control to manage those two things. Vince?
I would be remiss if I didn't ask my annual question about workers' compensation insurance. Are we able to pull that away from the league and leave the rest of it, or does it all have to come as a package?
You have to go to get it.
I'm looking to Jenny to see if she wants to answer the question or not.
Because I know, like, the school district, for example, uses SFM Mutual, which is a private insurance carrier in Bloomington. And I would imagine they shop that with the private market, and the private market is very competitive right now for work comp. But if we sacrifice, the balance of our insurance with the building and our equipment and everything else, because we pulled the work comp, then I would understand why we wouldn't want to do that. But I think I ask that every year and every year. It's a delicate, it's a
Yeah.
delicate subject, and I understand that, but
And we have unique, probably, challenges as compared to maybe a school district because we are so largely public safety weighted, and those create additional risks, and those areas do just create additional risks
I
and
see Mike over
challenges.
there nodding his head, so.
and I'm not even sure
Yeah.
if there's a private carrier that would insure a city of our size, if that's even
So they're
available.
very good questions, and I wanted to defer to Jenny, and Jenny, feel free to interrupt me. They're questions that we've asked internally. We have absolutely explored the conversation of what the possibilities are. I'm going to be more blunt than my team is, and I'll probably suffer the consequences of it later from them, but we don't believe that we are likely privately insurable, given the realities of some of the issues
Yeah.
that Jenny's mentioning. And again, we can go into the details of why on that. We can spare you of that from now, but generally speaking, some of those unique challenges, PTSD, particularly police and fire, we don't know that there are good alternatives through the exploration that we've done to this point in time. Kind of goes back to the creative leave no stone unturned conversation. It is something that we will continue to evaluate, and perhaps evaluate in different ways than we have in the past couple of years to see if there's a different answer.
Yeah.
A complicated one, nevertheless.
Yeah, I mean, we as a city tended to be higher than our peers
And
too
police and
in some of
fire
our
are so
experience,
different
and so
from
that
school districts.
that creates maybe a unique challenge for us that some other cities don't have, and that's been the case, for a number of years. Certainly, self-insurance is, when you see people going away from this, some cities do self-insure. And I think we're maybe not in the best position right now to look at that. And it's something we do kind of continually ask ourselves, and we've talked to our insurance agent about pursuing that as well. And we've done some work on that, and certainly will continue.
It's a tall undertaking to do self-insurance. I think Minneapolis does that, and you would need a lot of staff and resources to do something like that.
To Jenny's point, it is something that we've evaluated and will continue to evaluate given the cost realities. It's a conversation that we've had as part of this budget cycle, so clearly we'll continue those conversations, and
I'll ask again next year.
maybe I'll have a better answer.
Yeah.
All things considered, I don't think it's as aggressive of an increase. I think it's an increase nonetheless, but 14%,
Yep.
it could be worse.
Okay,
That's what I
well,
see
that's good
on
to
a
know,
day-to-day
because
basis.
when I saw the 14%, I thought, oh, I leaned over to Grant, and I said, oh my God, okay.
I'd be more curious what the rate increase on property was, because that's
Yeah.
gone up universally across the state, so.
We can certainly get you that
Yeah,
information.
Yeah,
and
we
we
can-
could
I don't know if I
also
wanna
kind of continue to ask the question with LMC because of their insurance trust.
And I don't mean to be flippant in my earlier comments. Our partnership with the league is very important.
Yeah.
It is not a reason to stay on this course if we have alternatives. From my perspective, every time I've asked the question, our team has gone and done the work and come back to me and said, we really don't have good alternatives, Greg. So we'll continue those conversations, and I think as we look towards the future, we've talked about this internally, particularly on PTSD, some of the new duty disability issues. I think there's likely a reason that at least staff will come back to the council and ask for your consideration on your legislative agenda for us to start taking some of those issues where we're really feeling pressures to the state legislature to try to address and remedy some of the issues that exist that create those pressures for us. So we'll continue to look at all angles, even outside of the insurance market, to continue to evaluate what the path forward might
Well,
look
and I
like.
think being proactive in our well-being is a great start to
Absolutely.
some of that
Yeah.
loss control.
Because, and I agree with you, Vince, because when you do that, then you take it off from under here, because
Helps
you'll have healthy
reduce.
people and you won't have, yeah. And that's that's the balance in looking at making sure we have the things that take care of their health, so they don't have to suffer
Yep.
on this end.
And I believe that we are absolutely seeing the results of those investments, making a significant difference in our
Yeah.
organization, particularly considering the year that we've
Yeah.
had.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Which, it's actually a perfect introduction for my current expenditure slide.
Hey.
So as we look at current expenditures year over year, we have about an $875,000 change, or about 6.7%. And really just under 3% is that investment in the well-being, those additional well-being investments that you approved about a month ago. So that is 3% of that overall change. And then as we looked at kind of our year-over-year expenses, about 4.1% across all departments. So relatively close to what that 3% overall assumption, that 3.5% overall assumption, but yet we saw about a 4.1% change in all other current expenditures. As we look at kind of the three categories, so personal services, current expenditures, we went through those. Transfers out, those decreased by about $363,000. That really represents the 2024 budget had a one-time investment from the general fund to the IT capital fund to really fund a new finance and payroll system. And so that was just a one-time increase. So you're seeing that 564,000 come down to kind of its normal level. And as I mentioned before, that's kind of those other operating support for some of those other funds that we've talked about today, and a few others. So total expenditures in the general fund, about $57.6 million. Did I say expenditures? Yeah, okay, I'm right. That was 2024's number. I was thinking revenues there for a minute. And in 2025, about $61.5 million. So an increase about 3.86 or 6.7% year over year. With that, the general fund, again, I think I mentioned this in an earlier slide. If you were to look at a snapshot of last year's general fund, the trajectory of those fund balance, that ending fund balance and that fund balance requirement would look very much the same. Certainly, we've got fund balance that is well over our minimum at this point. I think about 54%, but the planned spend down that was anticipated in previous budgets is really going to start in 2025, 26, and 27, really bringing us to our policy minimums in 27 and 28. But as you can see, there's a slight increase in that ending fund balance number in 2029 to really start building up fund balance in those later years. But we certainly are seeing, as you look at total revenues and total expenditures, those total expenditures, we are seeing, about, depending on those first couple of years, a larger increase in our org analysis position. So you are seeing a steady increase in expenditures over the 5-year period. General fund, if you take a look at fund balance and really compare to policy levels, as you look at that light blue and that gray, that bottom line and that top line, that really is that 40 to 50% minimum policy range that we have for the general fund, with 40% being the lowest end of that range, really. And then you can see that 45% target, that really is our target, so that, gives us additional flexibility for one-time uses if we need it. And the bars are representing those actual balances and then projected balances from 2025 through 2029. Again, you can see 27 and 28 really are those low points, and then you can see that fund balance start to build up. Right now, as of 2023, we do have a pretty healthy fund balance with pretty healthy reserves. But again, that's all included in that total finance plan projection. So, we need those balances now in order to pay for that planned that organalysis plan from 2023. Here is a snapshot of where we are at with FTEs and comparing to the organalysis. The 2025 organalysis that we reviewed late last year really called for 11 FTEs. We are balanced to that this year. We do have a few changes and reclassifications. Really, you can see in the city manager area, really, we have the FTE for the deputy city manager, taking that and reallocating that in order to support the alignment and the change in the deputy roles. So while we do have a few reallocations between departments, generally speaking, we have balance to that organizational analysis from December. Certainly want to note in police, those 3 additional FTEs that were funded by the COPS position are included here. And as we discussed in early February, certainly 3 additional fire positions. We've reflected changes then across the other departments as we had planned in community development, finance, and public works and strategic initiatives. So really balancing out those needs across departments. Certainly, we know we're doing communications assessments and IT assessments, so those will inform future organalysis, the future organalysis once we have those results. So as you can see currently, as projected for 2024, we had about 321 FTEs planned. For 2025, we have a total of 332.
2 things on the slide just to reiterate. First, with Hugo announcing his retirement by the end of the year, this does reflect me essentially eliminating that position out of the city manager's budget and reallocating it to provide both of the new deputy city managers in their dual roles with support staff. So what you see is 1 FTE coming out of essentially the city manager's budget, not essentially, coming out of the city manager's budget, then that FTE being reallocated. How we've placed it in the budget is to the community development department. That'll be a division coordinator for our community operations division, reporting to Jeff. The other then FTE is the division coordinator for organizational services, reporting to Jenny. So that was one of the significant shifts. Basically, what we're doing is taking Hugo, sorry to talk about you, in front of your face, taking Hugo's FTE and the budget associated with it and splitting it out into those 2 positions to more efficiently and effectively support our operations. Bringing the original organizational analysis, just by way of memory, that suggested 3 FTEs as deputy city managers in the city manager office. Essentially, what this final iteration balanced to the organizational analysis that you saw in December, essentially eliminating those positions and more effectively using them across the organization or realizing them for some budget savings. The other point to make here, and BJ is not here this evening, but we have made some assumed adjustments in not the number of positions included in the fire department, but rather based on his request, the type of positions. So the 3 positions included in the organizational analysis that you see in front of you, balanced again to what you've seen previously, both in the fire department standard of cover and in previous organizational analysis to inform the budget process. We're taking those 3 positions and using them for battalion chiefs that essentially will serve as higher level leaders, managers for each of our 3 fire shifts. With a plan then in 2026, there was a planned 6 FTE addition to the fire department that included 3 battalion chiefs and 3 firefighter paramedics. We'll use all 6 of those positions in 2026 as firefighter paramedics to start filling out shifts. The plan is that if BJ is able to, and we're able to find a path to start recruiting for and hiring some of those 3 of those 6 firefighter paramedics planned in 2026 at the end of 2025 in a budget neutral way, essentially finding operational offsets in the fire department to do so. To accelerate that path, we will, and that's something that we'll keep the council updated on as we're able to make that happen. That's also a good reminder that, back to one of Jenny's earlier slides, BJ will be back in front of you, the fire department will be in front of you to present an updated standard of cover in 2025, which, much like the Axtell police staffing assessment, will mean that we'll have to have, like we did last year with police, probably several detailed conversations about fire staffing over the course of the next 5 years. So just prepare you for that in that conversation, but we're trying to be agile and creative and flexible in the way we're thinking about using these FTEs and those important operations to meet current demands and operational realities in the fire department.
So if I'm understanding correctly, when I look at an org structure for fire, you'll have the chief and his assistant chiefs, and then you drop down into battalion chiefs?
This is where the fire chief will
Yeah.
cringe when he watches this video, because inevitably I'm going to say something wrong. So anyone correct me if you wish, but essentially those are shift command positions to assume control of scenes and operations
Okay.
24/7, juxtaposed to the reality now where we have command staff who
yeah.
aren't 24/7. It builds out the operation to meet the level of service demand that we already have, to make sure the department has the appropriate structure.
Yeah, okay.
And then he will correct me in whatever I misspoke on when he's back in front of you. But generally speaking,
And
that's
then
my
he'll help me to understand what his org structure is.
And I'll be very honest with you, Mayor. I don't know what the actual people manager reporting structure will be, other than to understand that those will be 3 24/7
Yeah.
shift-based
Yeah,
commanders,
24/7, yeah.
command staff,
Yeah.
leadership staff to run shifts
Yeah.
for us
Yeah.
on a 24/7
Yeah.
basis,
Yeah.
and relieve some of the pressures on our captains
Well, that's
who
what
are
I was
currently
thinking.
managing those shifts,
Yeah,
right?
well, that's what I
to-
was thinking, because each shift has the captains.
Correct.
Who are, and now you'll have command shifts.
Correct.
So, okay,
More efficiency, more effectiveness in our structure, and ultimately in our operations.
okay. Your domain.
That's gonna be a fun clip to share with BJ and get feedback on later.
I'll make sure to.
So what
Thanks.
were you
Show
trying
him.
to explain?
Staff will gladly snip that in the video.
This is a table we presented last year. It's really just a 5-year snapshot of some of the things, some of the major data points that we look at every year. First, that property tax percent increase over the last 5 years, 4%, 4.8, 14.5, and 7.63 last year, and 7.06 projected for this year. Our city tax rate over time has stayed about around that 43%, as market values have kind of remained relatively stable and haven't increased a lot. The tax rate did increase a little bit more this year to 45%. You can see that market value really is very close to what it was last year, with just I think it was a 0.34% increase. And then, and really what's driving that, and the residential values have really flattened. And so that's driving a lot of that change. And I have a slide later that will kind of talk about the changes in the different property classifications, so we can take a look at that. But our median home value, you see it actually went down about $1,500. If you look at our other Dakota County cities, especially Egan, Apple Valley, those kinds of cities, they're experiencing that same thing. I think ours went down 0.34%. Apple Valley's was closer to 1% of a decline in their median value home. I think Egan had over a 1%, or about 1%. So it's I think every community is seeing that flattening of those home values, or those residential values. taxable market value. So how is that kind of pie divided in terms of the property types? As you can see, residential is the biggest component of our taxable market value. So certainly as those values flatten, we'll see less of an overall increase. We are seeing in 2025, or for taxes payable 2025, a larger increase in the commercial industrial values. So those actually rose, I think, about 5 or 6%. And apartments had about a 2.5% increase. So really that, if you look at this pie last year, I think CI values were about 19%. This year, they're about 20% of our overall taxable market value. So increasing to levels that are increased a little bit and kind of coming back a little bit to levels that we had seen before. As we look at overall market values, this really compares our estimated market value change over the past 10 years and also our median value home change. So generally speaking, as residential is the biggest component of our market values, you can see they generally follow a similar trend line. You can see kind of a narrowing of that margin in 2025. That really reflects we did have a slight decline in our residential values while we had a slight increase in our overall taxable market values, and that's really being driven by the increase in commercial values.
Value that we're over 10 billion.
Jenny, the mayor had a question
Yeah.
about,
This is
That
a change
25?
in our estimated market value.
Yeah, I need to,
You
you
know,
know what, you're right,
because
because
it's up
that
to
should
10
be just
billion.
under 10 billion, yeah.
Yeah,
It's 9
because last time was it about 8, 9
Yeah.
billion, it's now, it's
Just
about 10 billion, so,
$10
that
yeah.
so
looks
there's an
correct as I'm,
increase.
that looks correct as I'm reading.
Okay, yeah.
Because the black line is
Is the-
estimated
Oh,
market
yeah,
value.
I was looking at the wrong
Yeah.
The blue
line.
line is
Affirmative.
Median
home
Yep,
value, so yes. Short answer, Mayor, is
Yeah, we're about 10
estimated
billion.
market value just under $10 billion.
Yeah, 10 billion,
Billion,
With a
yep.
B.
yeah.
Just about,
B.
I think, yes, that
Yeah.
that estimated market value is just under 10 billion for
Yeah.
payable 2025. And then that median value home, which is that top blue line, is $350,000 for 2025. Yep.
Not bad for a small little city.
Yeah, it's, I mean, you know, we were
Yeah.
under 6 billion in 2016,
Yeah.
so there has been quite an increase, certainly that 16% in 2022.
Well, I
really.
pay attention to it because it's one of the indicators that the raters also look at. You know?
Yep, they're gonna look at, those overall market
Yeah.
values and those trends, certainly as part
Yeah.
of their rating analysis. So that really brings me to the end of my presentation for tonight, and really wanted to end with what we started with, is really just a reminder on the budget calendar, but certainly, I'll stand for any questions, that anyone has.
Okay. Questions for Jenny or Greg or staff?
We kind of asked on the go, so I'm good.
You're good? Yeah, okay. Yeah. Kara, did you have a question? You're good? Or,
I'm good.
okay.
Good.
You're
Very
good?
consistent with the March presentation, which I kind of followed
The what?
The March presentation, yeah.
from Ellers. I was just kind
Yeah.
of comparing to see what may have changed or,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah. So,
good financial management.
Several times.
and I just want to thank Greg and all of our
It's more expensive.
leadership team members, the directors and everything. Thank you so much. I mean, we give you some tough direction and you work hard at bringing back a budget that allows us to, even with everything that we have gone through, you bring back a budget that serves the community's needs and what they expect of us. One of the things that I have received recently, and I should share this with you, Greg, and I think I've had probably 5 or 10 calls or communication with people. When they call into City Hall, they don't get an electronic answering service that tells them to go to, you know, press this number and then this number and then they'll get to. What they like is they're talking to a live human being and they get an answer right then and they get directed. they liked that a lot. And I know that cost more, but it's better than the electronic answering service we used to have, and they used to punch numbers and going through. So I just want to pass that through. And then also with everything that's been going on, in the last week or two, Colonial Park and all of the improvements, because neighbors were complaining about the overgrowth and all of that. And so thank you to Hugo and the work that he's done there, and to Keller Lake and all the work that's been done there. I mean, so I look at all of these things and the budget that you've brought to us. I attended the pop-up neighborhood engagement meeting for Kelleher Park. That was well attended by the people who live around Kelleher, and they felt heard. And we went over and above, not only doing the chemical treatment to the lake, but also did the harvesting to the lake. So you've seen all of those emails that came back, and they were so appreciative of that. It's that care to the community and to all of those people, I think that, pays high dividends. So thank you, because people know we care. We hear them, we address it, and they hear, and they see that we do care about them and issues. We just don't say, oh, well, it doesn't meet our process or whatever. Anyway, we go over and above. So thank you very much, and thank you for all of the work, to each and every department head, for all of the work that you all did in all of those effective correction action that got to where we are tonight. Yeah.
Well, you and I and a few members of staff took a tour of the park.
Parks, yeah.
Several parks last
Yeah.
night.
About 13.
And we witnessed some parks that had new equipment and some new surfaces and some nice improvements. And we also visited some parks that were way overdue, like parking lots that looked a little bit like Diff Lane 13. And some park equipment that needs updating, some replanning. There's some accessibility issues to some of the facilities. One was pretty funny, walking through the forest to get to the soccer fields.
Isn't that
so
awful?
weird, yeah.
Well,
So
Hugo and I
yeah,
saw
was-
that, and we
that
came
was
back and
decades
said,
ago,
that's
bad planning,
unacceptable.
right?
Yeah.
But my question for staff is, we recognize there's a need. We know there's a plan and process, but when do you think the realities of those needs are going to be addressed by the council to get our arms around what it's going to take to put some investment and shore them up? Because the maintenance of some of those is not good at all. Like, it's really terrible, and it's not consistent with others that we've been able to get to. And then you have this one that's so badly, just worn, right? It's worn out, the parking lot's patched and cracked, and so it's yet another severe growing pain of a city of our size that experienced explosive growth in the 80s, and all those assets are getting really old, and we haven't addressed maintaining them the way we should, so we want to, or we should have that discussion.
Yeah, and what I do like, thank you, Greg, and to everybody, with all of the studies that are going on right now, to inform us. I mean, the park study really informed us and identified 1 and 2s that we have to address. And then there were some that, yeah.
So it could be a very long answer, and I'm going to try not to do that to you right now. But the short answer is back to our capital budget presentation and conversation.
Yeah.
And presentation of the parks plan. The good news is we have the parks plan that identifies every asset that we have on, in, or above the ground in the park system. That plan has identified over $7 million of condition 1 and 2
Two, yeah.
assets in the system. condition 1 and 2 assets are the lowest rated of a 5-point scale. Basically, condition 1 and 2 is 1, it's an urgent issue that needs replacement now. 2 is it's going to be an urgent issue that needs replacement in the next 2 or 3 years. So the plan right now in the capital budget is to address in the next 3 years all of those condition 1 and 2 assets, either by identifying through our frameworks the established commitment around right sizing and making smart decisions in the park system, things that just might not need to exist anymore for removal, or replacement of those assets. So the short answer is, over the course of the next 3 years, through the Parks Renovation Fund, at about $2 million a year of investment, we will address those condition 1 and 2 items. So everything that you saw on the Parks tour with the PNRC this week, those are all projects that will actually be addressed next year in the current proposed budget. That will align with the continued work on the parks plan that we're doing now. So in August and September, we're out to vision all of our community parks through neighborhood meetings, some open houses, those types of kind of intense in-person engagement, and then online surveys of what the community wants our park system to look like in the future, so we can start to inform those park investments that are currently funded out of the Parks Investment Fund, which is currently receives its revenue through park dedication fees. So as we have that information aligned with the immediate repair and replacement or removal of items that need immediate attention, bring those together and continue conversations with the city council about where do we want to start to make investments in new infrastructure on the park side of things. The additional elements that are being worked on right now of the parks plan that we'll come back and talk with the city council about likely next year, end of this year, early part of next year, are our operations and maintenance plan. Said another way, what are the standards that we're going to implement not to find ourselves in a similar situation again in the future? How are we taking care of what we have, both through the condition 1 and 2 replacement and through ongoing operations and maintenance investment on the staff side of things? And then we'll add those park visions in, and that's where I really think that we can talk about the not only the short term address, take care of what we have, but the long term, what do we want our parks to look like? What's the community said to us from a vision perspective, and where do we need to start investing? We'll then have to wrestle with the funding question, in that fact of the matter is the revenue source for the Parks Investment Fund that funds new things right now is only park dedication fee, and that is the fees, and those are not a dependable source of revenue.
Well,
right now
we're
that fund
built
has
out.
about $4 million.
About 5.
About $5 million.
And we're built out, so we're not gonna get park dedication from new development.
Yeah, it's not reliable in terms of long-term
That was a long way of
funding.
saying in the next 12 months, we're going to have all of those conversations.
Yeah.
Well, I think about the pickleball discussion 2 years ago now, and we didn't do it last year, and now we're not gonna do it this year, and we just keep delaying the implementation of, or the building of, some new pickleball courts, because we're waiting on this bigger plan, and this bigger plan is a behemoth of a project. It's huge. It takes a long time to get through it. But to our pickleball citizens out there, we're still working on it, but I think
Yeah.
they're getting weary of our excuse of why we can't build one. The second thing is, I just got that letter. Did that direct mail piece with all of those dates for the parks, public engagement,
Yeah.
did that go out to every mailing address? Did it only go out to targeted areas around parks that are going to be involved in some sort of, comprehensive public input study?
Yeah.
It was as widely distributed as we can, given the information that we have available to us. So I can get a specific answer
Okay.
to you.
Yeah,
but I
I
believe
opened it
it
up
went.
yesterday when it came in the mail, and
Well, because you
long
live
list
by
of
a park,
dates.
well, you live across the street from,
Yeah, that's what I was asking, was
Crosstown.
it, because
Let me
there's a
get an
long
answer.
list of
West.
parks, it's not just 5, I mean, there's
We'll get an answer
Over
to you on
15
that.
anyway, so.
And back to your previous comments on pickleball, really, if the council wishes to direct us to work on the Alamagnet project now, we certainly could do it. It's essentially shovel ready.
But how
So
are we gonna
that's
pay for it?
absolutely a conversation that we could have at any point in time the council wants to have.
Well, I would like to be better informed, and because of where we're at with regard to expenditures and how we're going to pay for all of that, especially when we're going through police and city hall projects. So for me, it's, what are the most important priorities that we have on our plate?
Well, it's a good point. It's not getting any cheaper, and it's been 2 years now.
No, it's not getting any cheaper.
We've probably just experienced a substantial increase in the cost of that project that we tabled to do this comprehensive plan, and it's just getting more and more expensive. It's chewing up more and more of that 5 million because it's a new amenity. But when are we gonna do it? I mean, when are we gonna finally get to that decision and make the decision and do it? And essentially address the fastest growing need for a park asset in the last, I don't know,
Yeah.
go back how long?
Yep.
Have we ever had an explosive growth
No.
of a sport like that
Yeah.
that demands courts that we can provide, that cities are providing around us, and there we're still stuck in this decision-making process? I think we need to make the decision, or if it's another year, it's going to be another 5 to 10% higher. Maybe not, hopefully now, but we've already suffered some increases. I'd like to make a decision on that. I guess I'm
Well,
tired of
why don't
waiting.
we wait till after we do the budget? And then have that in-depth discussion
Sure.
about what
This-
that's
this
going to,
money's been
what
sitting in
that's
that
all
pot
gonna
waiting
mean.
for
And what
something
does
to
it mean
put
to
it
other
to for quite a
parks?
while.
If we put all the money there, what about the other parks in the system?
Well, I don't know if we're gonna put all the money into just Brick Boards, but
Well, all the money we have now, $5 million is all we have in that fund.
So certainly a decision the council can make now. I'm happy to take whatever direction the council has. Another, I think, important piece of information is we are planning in the 2025 Parks Renovation Fund capital budget. We are planning to resurface or replace 12 of our tennis courts. One of the things that I've asked staff to do in each of those locations, clearly the infrastructure is there. It's more cost effective for us to resurface and reuse things that we have and make sure that we're taking care of them. We did talk in the PNRC Parks Tour that we do annually just this week about our intentions to consider perhaps replacing, based on community feedback, consider replacing some tennis courts with 1 or 2 off pickleball courts as part of those complexes. Also, I know it's not a popular solution, but we are multi-striping all of those facilities for multiple uses: tennis, pickleball, things like futsal, some of the other demands that are there. Not an ideal solution, but certainly using the assets that we already have as we take care of them to also try to address some of those needs. So that's another, and again, Garrett's not here this evening. He was meeting with another group on an issue, but certainly something that we'll keep you updated on and continue that conversation as well. But again, happy to take the council's direction on, particularly we're talking about the Alamagnet pickleball project. It's a 6-court pickleball project that essentially we have now ready. Staff did a good job this year of getting it through design and development. The project would be ready to go when the council wishes for it to be included in the budget.
when can it be brought back so we can talk about it? I guess is a question. Or maybe the question is anybody else
Do
on
you
the
want to
council
bring it
want
back now
to
to
move
talk
forward on
about
it?
it?
We almost built it like 2 years ago, and then we just put it off.
Well,
I guess-
of course we did, because we have to look at our finances. And we're doing police and city hall. So,
We have funds in the park system now to do things, though? I mean, that's.
5 million, but we also have a whole lot of,
No, I get that,
park,
but
yeah, so
the city
so
hall
we
thing
put
is
all of
another
that money in.
Revenue source for us.
And I think that's where the discussion comes in. Do we put the money there and then just let the others go?
I don't know what it cost us $5 million to do a pickleball court, but. I could build-
Do we
Yeah.
I
have,
could build
is the
13
mon-
houses for
Huh?
that.
is the money already set aside for that project?
No.
So,
At least I don't believe so.
It's a good question, Councilmember Gustafson, or Councilmember Workman.
You can confuse us.
Oh,
It's easy.
I know. You know,
Apologize.
Dan
You need to
is,
confuse us.
Well, no, because your nameplates are,
Your nameplates are switched, but I.
Oh.
yeah.
who did that?
don't know.
Mr. Gustafson playing a little
Yeah.
trick.
I said all that stuff earlier?
We
Mayor
do
gave
not,
us keep
we
it
do
track.
not,
Yeah.
based on the conversation with the council to date, we do not have a placeholder in the Parks Investment Fund for the Alamagnet Pickleball Project.
Right.
That would be an easy change to the budget, should the council wish to move forward. Now, there are trade-offs to any decision that we make, right? We know that we have $5 million in that fund, and we don't have identified additional revenue. I just asked our Parks and Rec director what the current cost estimates of that project are. I'm thinking they're in the $1.5 million range, Jenny, for that project, but I would have to get back to the
Yeah,
council on it.
Don't know off the top of my head, but that,
I don't either.
That's-
The short answer
Yeah.
from a staff perspective, Councilmember Keeley, should the council wish it, we can bring this item back to you whenever you wish. We would basically be ready to go with it, should it be
Right.
something the council wishes to do.
And how many courts would that be at 1 something million?
6?
It's
What I heard.
currently 6, I
Yeah.
believe, again,
That's pretty nice.
test in my memory, but I can get those
Well-
specific answers back to you.
Okay. All right. Well, it's not something we're discussing tonight. So to all
Well, I
of
think a
our,
work session,
yeah,
we
work
we can,
sessions next
we
week.
can ask to have it come back, because we're not talking about, we're just asking staff to bring it back.
Well, you can put it on roundtable and ask for it to come back, like I have something on roundtable for next week. But to all
Unless
of our
the council
directors.
would like to just move forward on it, or bring it back to make that
We'll
decision.
put it on roundtable so we'll have a discussion
Because I feel
about
like we've talked about it 5 times over the last 2 years, and we're just sitting here waiting. The only reason that we didn't do it, Madam Mayor, if you remember, was we wanted to do a comprehensive parks inventory and comprehensive plan. I think, let's put it that way, let's put it this way. At one point, 2 years ago, maybe even 3 years ago, it was a one-off
2 years.
project, but we
2 years.
wanted to make sure that we took this global view. We've spent the last 2 years taking the global view, and I think, based on what I'm hearing, it's in a lot more clear focus, that Alley Magnet is a good spot for it. It is gonna fit with the
Yeah.
global plan.
No.
And so,
I
why are we gonna
understand that.
waste another year
I
and let the
understand.
price go up even higher?
No,
For a
I
decision that I
understand.
thought we were on the cusp of making 3 years ago.
So for me, it's, if we're gonna go with Alamagnet, so how many other parks are gonna push back?
That's my
It-
concern.
It's a capital
Yeah.
versus maintenance, it's not.
Well,
You can't use park, right, dedication for fixing up the ones that need fixing up. It's
well, this is
new
not a park dedication.
amenities and new-
This is not for, Alamagnet is not park dedication fund.
This is a brand-new
Yeah.
amenity.
So
it
it
is-
comes out of this Parks Fund. But that means all of the other parks then get pushed that have 1 and 2, and that's why we did the study to
1 and 2
understand.
maintenance is a different fund, correct? So maybe we should have.
No.
Jenny, to be clear, I don't want to misspeak because I've stepped all over myself tonight, I feel.
Yeah, you did.
The Alamagnet pickleball project would be funded through the Parks Investment Fund.
correct, yep.
So the Parks Investment Fund is the fund that is about future investment in new infrastructure, new investment into the park system. So that's
that
where it
like-
would be funded through. Councilmember Keeley, you're correct that when we're talking about repair or replacement, those condition 1 or 2 items, those are park renovation fund investments. Again, right now, it's about $2 million a year that we make in renovation investments through the system.
So one doesn't take money from the other. It would take money from this 5 million if we had a long list of pickleball wants and other things. That would be the discussion we'd have, but I don't think we've ever had a discussion that, that included like 4 or 5 new pickleball courts. And we were trying to decide which one we should do first, second or third, because we weren't gonna be able to do them all out of this current fund, or with any other facility that we talked about, futsal or otherwise. At 1.5 out of a $5 million fund, I feel we don't have any excuse to tell the pickleball community, who's been screaming at us for the last 3 years to build some more pickleball courts, while other cities around us continue to do that, and we sit here with the money, and why we haven't built it yet, it's beyond me.
Because we wanted to look at all of the assets we have within a park system and to see how, from my perspective, is doing a very thoughtful analysis of every asset we have.
We did.
And
We've
now
actually
we
done that.
have. And so
Right.
we know we have a lot of parks that need help, 1 and 2s. And
Different fund. Again, let's
So
keep capital
is
and
that-
maintenance separate. That's a different fund. Let's just focus on the capital for new. That's what I'm talking about. Not talking about any of the, I brought up the condition that we saw last night. I'm talking about the new money for new amenities, and why aren't we building pickleball courts now?
is that, because there are two different funds, so one is 5 million, is the other 3 million?
Well, the
The
Parks
investment fund is 3 million, and the,
The Parks Investment Fund is 5 million right now, that's the balance, and we don't have anticipated any large, projects that will add a significant amount of revenue, so we're about $5 million if you think about available fund balance in the Parks Investment Fund.
what do you want to do?
I'd like to make an educated decision and
Yeah.
not a decision right now. But prior to this discussion, I had the same thought as you, that they were coming from the same pools of money, so I did not want to prioritize new over
Yeah.
1s and 2s, but if those are two separate funds, and we don't have any other major projects ahead of that, then I would be open to getting that started, but I'd like to know, I'd like to have more certainty than
Yeah.
what we have right now.
I'm with you.
The request is to bring it back to council, not make the decision.
Well, that's what we're saying, need more information and not a decision tonight.
Well,
And looking at
I
those
thought I
funds.
phrased it correctly in the beginning, even though I kept pressing on, why aren't we building it? It's why aren't we
Well,
moving
you
forward
already said it,
to make
okay,
the decision? Okay.
You don't need
I
to
know,
beat
but
us
you've
over
been-
the head with the same
You've been
argument.
arguing against it all
No,
since I
I'm not
started it, so
against it.
could we
I just want
maybe have a
to
discussion
Vince's
about bringing
point, I
it to
wanna
council so the
educate
rest of us could
Yeah,
vote?
because we have so many parks that need help, and we're
Totally
gonna.
get it, different fund.
It's not that I don't want to do, I just want to make
Yeah.
sure that we have a good plan in place, that we're going to take a look at that, make new investments, and then also take care with these other parks that we hear from people about.
We do a better job than some state agencies that keep building capital and
Yeah.
don't have enough money to
Okay, it's
maintain
just
them.
us, we only have control over the things that we do.
No, I'm just complimenting how we do it. We have separate
Yeah.
funds and we actually manage it well. We try to maintain what we build.
Okay, all right. Staff will bring back some information for us to make a decision on a pathway forward. So, yeah,
Would you bring back information, just kind of explain to us how it affects different areas?
that's what I
That's
would
all-
like to
That's
know.
all we need to know.
How it affects other parks as well. I know this is a new investment. But I'd like to
But yeah, this is
Vince's
the first
point,
time-
I'd like
this
to
is
have
the
an
first I heard we had two
educated,
funds. I never
it's a
knew we
lot
had
of
two
money,
funds.
and people are going to say to us, he's spending almost, on police and city hall, and now you're going to do this. I just want to make sure we have good information to give to the people. You can talk to us about the investment fund that's there and get it done. Yes, but I want them to also see the information.
So a couple of things. The Parks Investment Fund and the Parks Renovation Fund was a change that was made in last year's budget
Yeah,
process.
Yeah,
Our intention was to be thoughtful about what we're investing in the future, Parks Investment Fund, and bifurcate that from the ongoing operations and maintenance costs of the park system. And that's been a fairly effective way for us to now manage the results of the parks plan that we have to date. Really, the conversation about building Alamagnet pickleball comes down to the opportunity cost. If the council invests in it now, it will be $1 to $2 million worth of investment and resources that won't be available for other priorities as we continue on in developing and building the parks plan. At the end of the day, we've been conscious on the staff level that we do hear from time to time people who advocate for pickleball, and we wanted to make sure that the project got through a design development process so it was ready if the council wished to have this conversation. So we can certainly bring it. Sounds like the council wishes for us to bring it back. I probably need 3 or 4 weeks to update cost estimates just to make sure you have good information on what the project would cost. There's 2 scenarios that we've contemplated on the staff side of things: a 4-court pickleball complex and a 6-court pickleball complex. And we can bring that information back to you, along with some discussion around the opportunity cost and our perspective on where we are from a parks plan and parks vision perspective, and how that could fit into timing, if that's agreeable to the
That's
council.
fine. Okay, is there anything else? Anything else? Staff, thank you for all of the work that you've done. Really appreciate it. And if there's nothing else, we stand as adjourned by acclamation.